The evening had been quiet until Muiz, her husband, suddenly emerged from the bedroom dressed far too well for what he claimed was office work. His polished shoes, carefully styled hair, and the crisp scent of cologne didn't match the image of a man heading to a late-night meeting. It was 10 o'clock at night, and until now he had never left home this late for any reason, let alone for work. Standing in the middle of their spacious home, his wife felt a growing unease settle over her. The property was more than just a house. It was a large, echoing estate where shadows seemed to multiply after dark. Sharing the place with only her 20-year-old daughter, Charmine, made the thought of a long, lonely night unbearable. "I don't like this," she admitted, her voice tinged with apprehension. "Take me and Charmine with you. We won't disturb you." Muize's tone softened as he placed his hands on her shoulders. "It's just one night. I'll be back in the morning," he said. The reassurance felt hollow and the unease didn't fade. She pressed again, asking why they couldn't accompany him if it was just office work. For reasons he didn't explain, irritation flashed in his eyes. "No, stop asking," he replied firmly. "Isam, if you're worried, call the maid from the servants' quarters to stay with you." Her pride bristled. The idea of summoning a servant to her personal room felt degrading. "So now I have to share my room with staff?" she remarked sharply. "Then sleep in the servants' quarters if you want company," Muiz countered. The suggestion only deepened her resentment. She had grown up in a wealthy family and married into another. Lowering herself to stay among the servants was out of the question. She had never even allowed them to linger unnecessarily in her bedroom. Unfazed, Muiz shrugged. "Lock the door, get some rest. If you change your mind, call Anila, or let Charmine sleep in your room tonight." At the mention of Anila, her dislike surfaced immediately. The young maid was undeniably beautiful, with a kind of effortless charm that made her uneasy. Muiz had always defended Anila whenever she suggested letting her go, claiming she was too poor to dismiss. In truth, the wife suspected it was Anila's looks that inspired his protectiveness. Swallowing her irritation, she told him she would manage on her own. He kissed her forehead, gave no further explanation, and left. The heavy front door closed behind him, leaving the house quieter than before, an emptiness that seemed to press in from all sides. She locked her bedroom, trying to ignore the faint unease curling in her chest. But as the night deepened, a flicker of movement outside her window would make her realize this was not going to be an ordinary night. After Muiz's car rolled out of the driveway, the silence in the house grew heavier. The ticking of the wall clock sounded sharper, the stillness deeper. She sat in her room for a while, trying to focus on the faint hum of the air conditioner, but her thoughts kept returning to his unusually polished appearance. It simply didn't fit the excuse of a late-night office meeting. She told herself she was overthinking, yet her body remained tense. Charmine had already gone to bed. The young woman had an early class the next day and always turned in before midnight. That left her alone in the sprawling bedroom, the kind of room where every shadow seemed darker and every creak of the floorboards felt louder. Then she saw it, a faint shift in the curtain by the window, as though something outside had passed by. She froze, staring, her pulse quickening. The window overlooked the back garden, where the outer wall was lower than the rest of the property. Still, the house was guarded. A stranger entering unnoticed should have been impossible. She moved slowly toward the window, but the shadows offered no answers. Her mind began crafting possibilities. Maybe it was just a branch swaying or a trick of the light. She sat back down, telling herself not to be paranoid. But minutes later, another flicker of movement caught her attention, and this time she was certain it wasn't her imagination. The thought of calling Anila crossed her mind, but pride stepped in. She had always disliked the maid, not only for her beauty, but also for the subtle sense of confidence she carried. It irritated her that Muiz seemed so defensive of Anila, dismissing any suggestion to replace her. In the wife's mind, Anila's presence in the house was tolerated only because she had no say in the matter. Instead of going to the servants' quarters, she wrapped her shawl tightly around herself and decided to check the rest of the house. If someone had truly managed to get past the guards, she needed to know. Passing Charmine's door, she considered waking her, but stopped. No need to frighten her daughter unless it was necessary. Her steps echoed softly as she moved through the dim hallways, checking doors and windows. Everything appeared in place. She made her way to the back entrance that led toward the servants' quarters, debating whether to involve Anila after all. Before she could knock, the maid's door opened on its own, and Anila stood there smiling, as though she had been expecting her. The door swung open before she could even lift her hand to knock. Anila stood there, her face glowing in the dim porch light, wearing bright bangles that clinked softly as she moved, and lipstick that gave her smile a striking contrast. The effect was startling, as though she had been waiting for this moment. "Please come inside, madame," Anila said warmly, stepping aside to make room. The wife hesitated, caught off guard not only by Anila's readiness, but also by her appearance. "You're awake? At this hour?" she asked, her tone betraying both surprise and suspicion. Anila nodded, her voice carrying a hint of pride. "Yes, madame. Before leaving, sir told me you might feel uneasy tonight. He said you could need me, so I thought I should stay awake just in case. I know you don't like being alone at night." Her words landed awkwardly. On one hand, there was the practicality of Muize's instruction. On the other, it felt oddly intrusive, almost as if this had been prearranged without her consent. The thought that Muize had involved Anila in her private fears irritated her further. "Thank you," she said curtly. "But I'm fine. I only stepped out for some fresh air." "You should rest." Anila tilted her head, her smile unbroken. "If you're not feeling sleepy, you can stay here tonight. My quarters may be small, but you won't feel alone." The suggestion struck her pride like a sharp blade. Sleeping in a servant's quarters was unthinkable. She shook her head firmly. "No, that's not necessary. You should go to bed. Sir shouldn't have disturbed you over nothing." Anila's tone softened. "If you change your mind, I can also come with you to the main house. Just say the word." The wife felt the conversation was becoming too personal. "It's fine. Go to sleep." With a polite but strained nod, she turned back toward the main building, her shawl wrapped tightly around her. She retraced her steps through the silent hallways, checking the windows one more time before returning to her room. The back door to the servants' area was locked behind her, a small act meant to restore her sense of safety. Yet the moment she entered her bedroom, her heart lurched. She thought she saw a shadow dart away from the window, disappearing into the darkness outside. Her earlier tension returned in a sharp wave, and she realized the night was far from over. The uneasy feeling from the shadow outside refused to fade. Every creak of the floorboards and faint rustle from the garden made her nerves tighten further. She sat on the edge of the bed, listening, unsure whether her imagination was playing tricks or if someone truly lingered nearby. Finally, the tension became too much to bear. Wrapping her shawl tightly around her, she left the bedroom and made her way back through the dim corridors to the servants' quarters. This time, she knocked firmly on Anila's door. The maid appeared almost instantly, smiling again as though she had been expecting the call. "Come inside, madam. You'll be safer here," she offered. But the wife shook her head. "No, I want you to come with me to the main house. Charmine is asleep there." Without hesitation, Anila followed. They moved quietly through the hallways until they reached Charmine's room. The young woman was curled under her blanket, breathing steadily in the deep rhythm of sleep. The windows were closed, the curtains drawn. Satisfied that her daughter was safe, the wife gently closed the door. Back in the main bedroom, she felt a wave of reluctant relief. It was strange to have Anila there. After all, just hours earlier she had dismissed the idea of inviting her, but fear had a way of softening pride. Anila glanced at her and said, "You seem tense. Why don't I massage your feet? It will help you rest." The wife refused at first, shaking her head. "It's not necessary." But Anila persisted with gentle insistence. "You've been busy all day. Let me help. You'll sleep better." Before she could object again, Anila disappeared briefly and returned with a small bottle of oil. Sitting at the foot of the bed, she began to press her hands into the soles of the wife's feet. Her touch was warm and surprisingly skilled, each movement slow and deliberate. The sensation was unexpectedly soothing. The wife felt her shoulders relax, her eyes growing heavier with each passing moment. She didn't remember when her breathing deepened into sleep. When she awoke, pale light was filtering through the curtains. She was lying diagonally across the bed, her blanket missing. Anila was nowhere in sight. The clock read 5 in the morning. Confused, she called for the maid, who soon hurried back in, claiming she had taken the blanket to wash because oil had spilled on it. After Anila left with the washed blanket, the early morning light gave her a brief sense of calm. She told herself the worst was over. Most of the night had passed, and soon the sun would rise. Pulling her shawl around her, she reclined on the bed, expecting to drift back into a light sleep. But the next time she opened her eyes, the room was not empty. A tall figure stood only a few steps away, his face concealed behind a black mask. For a second, her mind refused to accept what she was seeing. She had locked the door after Anila left. Charmine's name on his lips froze her blood. She nodded slightly, signaling she understood. Slowly, he removed his hand, but his gaze stayed locked on hers, his presence radiating menace. She tried to keep her voice steady. "Take whatever you want, just leave me and my daughter unharmed." A faint, chilling smile appeared beneath the mask. "I came for exactly what I want," he replied, stepping closer. "You'll remember this night for the rest of your life." She attempted to move away, but he caught her wrists and tied them quickly with a coarse rope. Panic clawed at her chest. This wasn't a thief looking for valuables. This was something far worse. The assault was swift and brutal, tearing away not just her sense of safety, but the dignity she had guarded all her life. When it was over, she was left trembling, the rope still biting into her skin. As he adjusted his mask, he leaned closer and whispered words that turned her fear into sheer terror. "Now it's your daughter's turn." She screamed behind the gag he forced into her mouth, her body thrashing in desperation. Bound and helpless, she could do nothing but watch him move toward the door, his footsteps carrying the weight of her worst nightmare. When she regained consciousness, sunlight was streaming through the curtains. Her head throbbed, her mouth was dry, and every muscle ached. For a moment, she thought she had woken from a nightmare, until the memory of the masked man's voice and the feel of the ropes returned in a crushing wave. She sat up abruptly, scanning the room. The door was closed, the windows latched. The only new presence was Muiz, standing near the foot of the bed, looking at her with a mixture of curiosity and mild concern. "What's wrong with you? Why are you shouting Charmine's name?" he asked as she tried to catch her breath. Her words tumbled out in panic. Someone broke into the house last night. He came into this room, he ruined me, and then he went to Charmine's room. We have to find her. She could be—" Muiz raised a hand to stop her. "Calm down. Charmine is fine. She had breakfast and went to school. Anila took her. When I came in, you were sleeping so soundly I almost didn't want to wake you." She stared at him, disbelief etched into every line of her face. "Sleeping? I wasn't sleeping. I was tied up, gagged. I couldn't move, couldn't scream." He cut her off with a frown. "Do you hear yourself? This sounds like some bad dream you're turning into a story. If someone broke in, the guards would have seen him. All the doors were locked. Nothing is missing from the house. Are you sure you didn't imagine it?" Her voice cracked under the weight of his dismissal. "Why would I imagine something like this?" Muiz's expression hardened, a shadow of suspicion crossing his face. "I think you're hiding something. Maybe you invited someone here yourself, and now you're using this tale to cover it up." The accusation struck her like a physical blow. "How can you even say that?" Instead of answering, he stepped back as if her very presence disgusted him. "I don't believe you. Either you let someone in or this entire thing is a fabrication. In both cases, you've brought shame into my home." Her protests fell into the silence between them. It was clear that not only would he not protect her, but he was also willing to brand her as the cause of her own suffering. Muiz's voice rose, his tone now sharp enough to slice through the air. "Do you think I'm a fool? The house was locked, the gates guarded. No one could get in without help from the inside. And you expect me to believe some stranger just appeared in your room, did what you claim, and left without touching a single piece of jewelry or money?" Her hands trembled at her sides. "I'm telling you what happened. I don't know how he got in." He stepped closer, pointing a finger at her chest. "I'll tell you how. You let him in. You've been desperate for a child. And since I couldn't give you one, you decided to take matters into your own hands. Now you want to play the victim to hide your shame. The words hit her like a slap. That's a vile thing to say, she whispered, her voice breaking. He gave a bitter laugh. Is it? You refused to have Anila in your room before, and suddenly last night you invite her over? Don't think I don't see the setup. You wanted her here to back up whatever story you're spinning now. But I'm not buying it. Her mind spun, the weight of the accusation pressing down on her. You're wrong. I didn't plan any of this. I don't care, he interrupted, his tone final. Whether you're lying or telling the truth, I will not live with you after this. You've disgraced me, and you've involved my stepdaughter in your madness. Pack your things and get out. You can take her with you, but you will not set foot in this house again. The certainty in his voice left no room for argument. She felt the ground shift beneath her marriage collapsing in a matter of minutes. By that afternoon, she had gathered what little strength she could and left for her father's home, collecting Charmine from school on the way. Her father was shocked to see her arrive so suddenly, his questions pouring out before she could even sit down. She told him pieces of the story but avoided the worst details. How could she explain something even her husband refused to believe? How could she answer the unspoken question? Why had the intruder come for her and her alone? The truth was she didn't know, and with Muize's words still echoing in her head, she feared she never would. 6 months passed in a haze of numbness. She stayed at her father's house, raising Charmine in the quiet shadow of shame and unanswered questions. The neighbors' stares, the whispered conversations she could never quite hear. She learned to keep her head down and avoid eye contact. Her father tried to be supportive, but he too avoided probing too deeply. The subject of that night was a wound no one dared to touch. She focused instead on her daughter's schooling, her routines becoming mechanical: breakfast, drop-off, chores, pickup, homework, dinner, sleep. It was a life stripped of joy but free of conflict until the afternoon Anila arrived. She was standing at the front gate when Charmine came running into the yard. The little girl froze upon seeing her stepmother from another life, then cautiously walked inside. Anila greeted her with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, then turned her attention to the woman she had once shared a roof with. May I come in? Anila asked, though she was already stepping past the threshold. Inside, the air between them was tense. Why are you here? She asked, her voice low but steady. Anila glanced toward Charmine, who had disappeared into her room before answering. I wanted to check on you and to tell you something you deserve to know. The woman crossed her arms, suspicion rising. 6 months of silence, and now you want to talk? Why? Anila lowered herself into a chair, her movements slow, deliberate. Because I've been carrying guilt, and I can't keep it to myself anymore. She paused, eyes flickering toward the doorway as if afraid someone might overhear. Her heart began to pound. Guilt for what? For that night, Anila whispered. I knew the man who came into your room. The words made the walls feel as though they were closing in. What are you talking about? Anila leaned forward, her voice shaking. He wasn't a stranger. He was someone Muize sent. He wanted to humiliate you, to make you leave without a fight. He told me to keep quiet and play along, and I did. The confession struck her like ice water. For months, she had lived believing it was a random attack. Or worse, that she had been disbelieved because the truth was too strange. But this was something else entirely. It was betrayal, carefully planned and executed under her own roof. For a moment, she could not speak. Her mind was a storm of disbelief, rage, and a sickening clarity. You're lying, she finally said, though her voice lacked conviction. Anila shook her head. I wish I were, but I saw it all from the beginning. Muize told me weeks before that he wanted you out of the house. He said he was tired of your accusations about his neglect, tired of your demands for attention. Divorce, he said, would make him look bad in front of his family, so he needed a reason that made you seem at fault. The woman's fingers curled into fists. And you agreed to help him? I didn't have a choice, Anila stammered. I'm not proud of it. He promised me security, Said he'd make me his legal wife if I cooperated. And I was scared. I've depended on him since my mother died. Without him, I had nowhere to go. Her eyes narrowed. So you let him send a man into my room in the middle of the night. Anila's voice trembled. He told me the man wouldn't hurt you, that he would only scare you, make it look like you'd invited him. He said it would be enough for people to believe you were unfaithful. The man was someone from his old neighborhood. I was ordered to keep Charmine distracted until it was over. She felt her stomach twist. You both destroyed my life. Do you understand that? My marriage, my dignity, my home, gone because of this scheme. Anila's eyes brimmed with tears. I do. That's why I'm here now. I can't live with the guilt anymore. Every time I see Charmine, I remember how she clung to you that night. Confused and scared. I want to help you make it right. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Make it right? Can you give me back the 6 months I spent drowning in humiliation? Can you erase the way my father looks at me, wondering if I'm telling the truth? Anila's voice dropped to a whisper. No, but I can give you proof. I recorded one of our conversations. Muiz bragging about what he'd done. I kept it hidden because I was afraid. But if you want to take him to court, you can use it. Her chest tightened. For the first time since that night, she felt something sharp cut through the fog of despair. Purpose. The phone felt heavier than it should as Anila placed it on the table. It's all here, she said quietly, her eyes not meeting hers. The date, the time, his voice, everything. She stared at the device, her pulse racing. This wasn't just a recording, it was a weapon, one that could finally shatter the silence and expose every twisted lie. For months, she had been walking through life as if shackled, every step echoing the injustice that had been done to her. Now, for the first time, she felt the cold steel of the key that could unlock those chains. Why now? She asked, her voice steady but laced with suspicion. Because I saw what it's doing to you, Anila admitted, and to Charmine. She deserves a mother who can hold her head high. I can't erase what I've done, but maybe I can help you reclaim what's yours, your dignity, your truth. She picked up the phone, thumb hovering over the screen. The file was labeled in a way only Anila would understand, but there it was, a lifeline disguised as a string of digital code. She tapped it, and the room filled with the unmistakable voice of Muiz, dripping with arrogance. She'll run away herself once the shame hits. I won't have to live